welcome to the Solutions Revolution, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Thomas Sheridan, who's somebody I wanted to speak to for quite a while. It struck me some time ago that really there's only one problem in the entire world, and that problem is that it's run by psychopaths. Thank you, Thomas, for joining us. Perhaps you'd agree with that statement.
Yes, it's great to be here, Clive. Unfortunately, it is. That's it. That's the only game in town regarding the dysfunctionality of the control system going back many centuries and millennia, is that these pathological individuals, the psychopaths, have managed to float or scrape or claw their way into the top of the power structures, and if they're not psychopaths at the top themselves, they are proto-psychopaths who've had to emulate the pathology and the machinations of the actual real psychopaths in order to maintain their position at the top of big business, politics, you name it. Yes, it is. This is it. That's the head of the snake we're dealing with.
And do you think the psychopaths are redeemable?
No. There's no evidence they can be cured, and there's the most profound thing of all. Well, maybe, I can never say never. They may come up with some kind of chip at some point that they'll put in the brain that will do something like actually make their limbic regions in their brain function in a manner that causes them to pause before they make certain decisions that may destroy other people's lives. But in terms of, is the psychopath a condition that can be cured? Well, let's look at this very profound fact. I've interviewed a couple of them that were like open psychopaths, two criminal ones, well, minor criminal, petty criminal size, but both were psychopaths. They don't want to be cured. You see, we impose this idea upon them that somehow that they're dysfunctional, i.e. they're unwell, and therefore they seek redemption, they seek to be cured. That's so far from how we should understand them. Psychopaths absolutely love being psychopaths. They love being feral and free. They love having the ability to do whatever they want without any kind of guilt or any kind of moral decision. And they love manipulating people, and they love playing games because they're thrilled by it. And there's all kinds of neurochemical reasons for that. But no, as far as I'm concerned, they cannot be cured. The only thing you can do when you have to encounter one at work or whatever is to get the hell away from them.
Yeah, running away seems to be the answer, doesn't it?
No contact ever again.
What about, let's say you've got a child and you're concerned that perhaps they might be psychopathic. Is there perhaps more chance that you might be able to do something at a young age?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that, because I haven't been asked this question in a very long time, and I've been thinking about it since. Now, if a parent has a child that they assume might be psychopath, do not rush to conclusions. Don't go into a state of, terror or anything like that. Children particularly young children, can often demonstrate psychopathic traits that can seem quite manipulative and cunning. This is a myth that childhood is filled with innocence and sweetness. It isn't. Bruno Bettelheim, in his book, The Uses of Enchantment, pointed that out, that, childhood is very dark in many ways. And a lot of little boys do things like torture insects and things like that, or they'll do things like that. Now, they'll do it once or twice and now and again. It may be an evolutionary thing in that, and in order to make them hunters or whatever, to get over their fear of killing something. It's only if they start seeming to have very industrial aspects towards it. For instance, if they devise things to capture animals, and they seem to get a thrill from it. Like in The Sociopath Next Door book, a very well-known book by Dr. Martha Stout of Harvard, she pointed out a fictional character of a political psychopath who, as a young child, was obsessed with smashing and destroying bullfrogs using rocks, and then used to try and, we'll say, kill 50 bullfrogs one day, would try and boast about it and try to break the record the next day by killing 60 or 70. Well, then you've got a real problem. Then you're dealing with a child that's seriously dysfunctional. And then you have to keep an eye open. You have to watch and see how this child develops. Sometimes they will change, and sometimes they won't, and they'll become normal. But I'll tell you something for nothing. I've spoken to a couple of women, particularly midwives, that one of them was in Norway, and she told me that when she picked up this, she used to pick up the deliver babies in a small town, and she'd have the babies in her hand right after they were born, and she said every so often a child would be born when you pick it up, it didn't feel right. It felt almost energetically incorrect or something. The child was healthy. The child was there, but the child wasn't responsive. And because she lived in a small rural community, she could monitor the interaction of the child with the families and other kids. And she became very adept at spotting the psychopaths. The psychopathic child, when it was breastfeeding, there was no sort of sense of connection with the mother. There was almost like, give me that nipple, and almost like an attack kind of element to it. And she said in every single case where this child didn't feel energetically right, they grew up to be, well, she didn't use know the word psychopath at the time, but she used to call them troubled people or dangerous or difficult people, or even, murderers and rapists and things like that. So yes, you can monitor them. And I think the main marker really appears around the onset of puberty. This is a big one for spotting a psychopath coming into maturity. They tend to develop quite sexually very fast, but unlike normal teens, where sex becomes a kind of a strange experience, they quickly understand the power of their sexuality to manipulate others. I'm talking about like young girls at a very young age. Young psychopathic girls will start having sex quite, 14 and below. They'll start right away, and the sex won't be a boyfriend that they have a crush on or something like that. They're actually learning. They're learning the skills of using sex to manipulate. And they will often do things like have sex with, say, a married man or a guy, an older guy over 17 or 18, 19, 20, and then blackmail them later on. They'll do things like move in with guys when they're 15, go and live in their houses, and they'll ignore their parents and this kind of very feral, very kind of like, to hell with you, but their sexuality will be purely about control. Now, in a male psychopath, I never want to be near one ever again, but I interviewed one for my second book, Defeated Demons, and he told me he lost his virginity when he was like 11 or 12, and he did it to a Down syndrome girl in a coal shed. He just wanted to see what it was like. There was a Down syndrome girl living next door, and he took her into the coal shed and essentially raped her. And that's how he lost his virginity. He wanted to see what sex was like. So they're two very good examples of when a psychopath, could be a child psychopath, is to watch them at puberty and especially understand and observe their attitudes towards puberty and sexual, coming of age sexually.
One of the things that has been pointed out to me is that some psychopaths become psychopathic because of a very difficult birth. Let's say that the birth is so difficult that they're stuck in the birth canal for 24 hours or something like that, and that they lose hope at that point. I mean, supposedly Hitler had a very, very long and troubled birth, and that somehow in that state they lose their humanity because they think that they're lost. Think that if you like, the world has come to an end for them, and believe that nobody could care for them, and they lose their sense of compassion and empathy as a result. Have you ever experienced that or heard about that?
Yes, and it's a very, very interesting idea, but I do not think it creates full-blown psychopaths. I think it creates what I call a proto-psychopath. Now, it's important at this point I distinguish between what an actual psychopath is and a proto-psychopath. Now, a psychopath, a pure-born psychopath, will have a very specific brain pattern under an fMRI scan. You can actually see this in real time, and it's quite fantastic. If you expose them to, situations, say, you take them into a laboratory situation, hook them up to an fMRI, and you show them, say, a series of stimuli, of images. Say one image could be a couple on a beach, the brain would have a certain neutral response. The next one could be a bunch of puppies, neutral response. The next thing could be a man having his head chopped off, neutral response. The psychopath in their brain just processes information in a neutral manner without any emotional activity within the frontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex, which is here, which tends to be inactive. Now, it's not damaged; it's there. Everything is working. The mirror neurons, they're all there. They're just not being used. It's a horses for courses kind of situation. And there seems to be a lack of activity in the limbic regions of the brain as well, where you put a normal person under this kind of induced laboratory trauma, the brain goes mad. You can actually see it going haywire as it's exposed to horrific images and so on, or changing when they show it something calming like kittens. The psychopath is neutral all the way, just processes information in a very matter-of-fact way without any kind of compassion or emotional involvement. Now, a proto-psychopath would be somebody, and this may well apply to this theory that you talk about, the difficult birth. Maybe it is generally a proto-psychopath is someone who's a normal person in terms of their brain functioning. They have the same kind of operational system in their cognitive processing within their neural pathways that anyone else that's non-psychopathic has, and something causes it to change. It could very well be that difficult birth. It could be abusive parents, the child badly damaged. It's a common thing in many dictators and things like that. They were abused by an uncle that put cigarettes on their skin or something like that. Che Guevara, his father, used to kill bed lice that would embed, a special kind of bed lice in South America that would embed themselves in his skin by putting lighted cigarette butts to kill the lice that burrow underneath them. And Che Guevara grew up to be, although some people think he's a hero, when you actually look at it, he was quite a sadistic individual. Now, there could be a situation where somebody was in a war situation, sectarianism, and they saw somebody being killed by a different race, and they would become proto-psychopathic. But these people, and then also in a military or war situation, these people can be cured. Because all you have to do is take them out of that situation, and you can actually go through a post-traumatic situation and fix them up again and cure them. And often it's very difficult for them. That's what a lot of post-traumatic stress is. With veterans of wars, the post-traumatic stress is often caused by flashbacks of guilt. What's happening then is the proto-psychopathic state is leaving them, and they're returning back to a normal, compassionate human being, and they're having tremendous feelings of guilt. I had a friend who had a roommate who was in the Yugoslavian Civil War, and he was actually involved in quite a lot of nasty things in Bosnia, and when he got to Ireland and was working here, he started to deprogram, and what he was doing was, the only way he could sleep at night was to lie in the living room floor on a sleeping bag with the stereo speakers right next to his ear and speed metal playing at a low volume. Otherwise, he would have horrific flashbacks and traumas. And this is the tragedy of the proto-psychopath vanishing, where a regular psychopath would have none of this stuff. They could stand in a field and see children being killed. They could even do it themselves. And it's just business. They wouldn't care. There wouldn't be any problem with them having guilt, compassion. They would just purely see it as a task to be done. And that's what makes the pure psychopath, so terrifying and frightening, is this inability to process compassion in any situation.
And what's the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath?
Well, a sociopath is really the proto-psychopath that I'm talking about. I'm not particularly fond of the term sociopath because it's one of these things from the DSM that's muddled the water. To me, there's only psychopaths, and even many other people who are, there's only psychopaths. See, the problem with the word term psychopath, because of the Alfred Hitchcock movie Psycho, everyone thinks they're act killers. Norman Bates wasn't a psychopath. He was some kind of delusional schizophrenic psychotic or something, but he wasn't a psychopath. Psychopaths are generally not violent. So that's why the term sociopath became popular, to actually apply to non-violent psychopaths who demonstrated the same crudeness. But Herbie Cleckley, in his book The Mask of Sanity, was using the term psychopath to describe sociopaths, And he was the one who basically invented the science back in the 1940s. That's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. So I shunned away from the term sociopath, and I just decided that proto-psychopath would be better, because I just wanted that term psychopath out there and used as much as possible, because before I came along, it wasn't being used that much. It kind of died away. It was the most popular term, and sociopath took over. I started using the term psychopath because I believe that there's an instinctual need for us to understand the inherent dangers of these individuals in society, and particularly in the power structures. And now I'm glad to say that, well, there's a negative side to it as well, that everybody's using the term psychopath since I wrote my book, Puzzling People, but they're also trying to, should we say, tart the condition up. And you have people like Professor Kevin Dutton, and you have people like Professor James Fallon, who are basically going around saying psychopaths are wonderful, and we all need to unleash our inner psychopath and all this other nonsense. Because basically, the cat is out of the bag now. People like myself and others have pointed out that individuals like Tony Blair are not like us. They're very, very different. And then now there's a real thrust now to try and normalize it. But it's not going to happen, because I can see how much that's flopped for them. It just did not take off the way they expected.
So, if one can spot it on an fMRI scanner, do you think that business leaders and politicians should be asked to take one of these tests in an fMRI scanner before given any position of power?
Yeah, I think they should, but I don't think everyone in society should. But they want to get one, they should. But anyone, if they committed a crime, perhaps. We're going on a slippery slope here of, like, Minority Report and pre-crime and stuff like that. There's one aspect of me, an old-fashioned liberal, is I believe that civil rights should be extended to everyone, including psychopaths, because that's just how it is. But sure, like, if we had a position of someone who's in charge of a nuclear arsenal or something, I wouldn't have any problem with that. But we should, we could go down a very slippery slope, because what would happen is they would start bringing in mandatory scanning for everyone, and they'd be doing scans on poor people in poor neighborhoods, and they would be ignoring the Bush family, and they wouldn't get scanned at all. They'd skew it up. They'd skew it in their favor, just like eugenics and everything else.
Yes, quite. Is there any link between narcissists and psychopaths?
Well, all psychopaths are extreme narcissists. They all think they're God in their own mind. They think that, the whole planet serves them and them alone. So they're incredible narcissists. But narcissism is a different thing altogether. We are all narcissistic in some level. And just like having an ego, it's something that can be very useful if you want to be good at sport, or you want to do well in a non-pathological way in show business, and you're good at what you do. You're, say, like a Bruce Lee or Muhammad Ali. There's absolutely no real harm in bigging yourself up in order to achieve and excel in your field. Once you don't, like, put that to every other aspect of your life, like, just because say some guy is the best boxer in the world, that does, and he should big himself to get there. He should big himself up, but he shouldn't be saying I'm the best husband in the world, or the best cook in the world, or the best lover in the world. That's when it goes out of control. And that's a little dose of narcissism is present in all of us. But narcissism is precisely just like the ego. You have to learn to tame it, or it will just completely take you over. But yes, all psychopaths are incredibly, ultimately they're incredibly narcissistic.
So, I meet a lot of people in my line of work who say, well, I didn't realize it, but I married a psychopath.
Yeah.
Could you run through how to spot a psychopath? Because there are a lot of people who literally seem to team up with one after another and don't seem to be able to spot them at all. How do we spot them?
It's funny, because a friend of mine in Dublin tonight just called me up and says, Thomas, it's happened again. I fell for this girl, and and I had a little chat with him, and this is a wonderful synchronicity we're having here. A psychopath is an ardent student of human behavior. Because they have no compassion and no feelings, what they do is they study other people, like a botanist would study a plant, like a biologist would study a bacteria. They learn everything about you. They watch you. And they target you. You know, God forbid, Clive, say they wanted to take over your business, right? And say you wanted to expand your business, and a psychopath came into your life, and he would say, get to know you, say, hey, Clive, how's it going? How's the business going? All this stuff. He would want to know everything about you, or she would want to know everything about you. Remember, there's plenty of female psychopaths too. And they would want to know everything about you, and that would include very deep things. So say it turned out that when you were a little boy, your dad died, right? And you didn't have a dad growing up children, and you had this need in your psyche for a father figure. Well, the psychopath would figure this out very, very quickly and become your father figure. Or a brother, if you had a brother who died, a twin brother, a brother who died when you were young, you never really got over it. He will become that brother. He will he will find that missing ghost in your soul. He will also, or she will also flatter you incredibly. They'll say things like, wow, this is a fantastic business you've built up from nothing. It's doing amazing. I mean, I can't believe you've asked me to come in as a partner. What can I possibly teach you, Clive? What can you're the master. You are the man. You are the man, Clive. And all this kind of nonsense. And, you think, oh, I'll never fall for that kind of sycophantic flattery. But if they couple that with being very charming, find that missing ghost in your soul and filling it in, and also love bombing you, telling you how wonderful you are, telling you, you know, if you poured yourself a glass of water, they tell you you really poured that glass of water in style, that kind of thing. And you know, and they introduce you to people that, like, this is my mate Clive, he's like really cool and all this kind of thing. They tell you how good looking you are and all that, you know. They tell you things like, oh, I know these couple of women, these are gorgeous women, they fancy you. It's that kind of nonsense, all this kind of thing. And it breaks down your defenses. So this monster gets into your business, right? And it's, at first it seems great. You may start winning contracts. You may start getting orders and accounts. And then you'll notice things are going a bit strange. For instance, money might start going missing. You might say to them, well, we were supposed to pay our taxes at the end of this quarter. We're missing, from the accounts, we're missing £3,000. Do you have any idea, whatever the guy's name is, where it goes on? And he'll say, and this is where it really begins. This is called gaslighting. He'll say, Clive, there's no missing 3,000. And you'll say, no, we did the books. I know. I have the orders. I have the invoices. And say, Clive, I don't know what you're talking about. What are you on about? There's no missing 3,000. And then you start thinking to yourself, and they'll do it so coldly and so matter-of-factly that you'll start thinking to yourself, this is called gaslighting. You go, what, could I have processed those invoices wrong? Something not right. Did I make a mistake? And then you go over it again, and you'll say, no, I didn't, and you go back to him. And he'll say something like, look, we've already been through this. Look, if you can't sort out your finances, there's something wrong with you. And maybe you need a holiday. In fact, take a holiday. In fact, get yourself sorted out. And then it gets worse, and things happen, and then things you can't understand, stock goes missing. Next thing you know, you may have a person or a company that's supplying a product to, and suddenly the phone calls will stop. And if they call up the phone, if you've been dealing with this guy forever, and you call him up one day and you say, hey, Billy, how's it going? I want to talk about the accounts. And they say, oh, I don't want to talk to you, Clive. No, can I talk to Jeff, or whatever the psychopath's name is? And suddenly Jeff has taken over your accounts because he's told the guy, Billy, the customer, that Clive is not well. He's not well. He's losing money. He's damaging the company. And now you're being undermined. And he's stealing the company out from underneath you. And and then your confidence is breaking down. You're wondering where this great guy that you went in the business has gone to. He's very cold. He's very nasty. He's very unbelievable with the passive aggressiveness. Like, for instance, if you're carrying some file, a laptop across the office, and you drop the power cord, and he'd say something like, and he goes, oh, you sure you're okay there, Clive? And you go, well, I just dropped the power cord. Yeah, sure, yeah. And that kind of thing, you know, always trying to undermine your confidence. And then you'll be heading towards a nervous breakdown. Then he'll take over you'll probably end up in hospital sick. He'll tell you to do something. He'll start stealing all the clients off you. He'll start continuing trying to make out that you're unwell, and then bang, he'll jump ship. Your business is destroyed. He's got all the accounts. He's pocketed a whole bunch of money, and you're left there in a state of post-traumatic stress disorder going, what the hell just happened to me? Who the hell was this bastard? And what's been done to me? And it doesn't matter if it's a business relationship, a personal relationship, you will be left in a horrific state of post-traumatic stress because you will have been worked on and turned inside out, have your whole psyche destroyed while this monster just took everything you had and went on without a care in the world. And then if you don't seek help, and by help I mean is trying to understand what happened, you'll start looking over his past and you'll find out he did this to other companies and other people. And then you say to yourself, oh my God, he was a psychopath grifter and he had me stitched up all along.
So is there some way to short-circuit all of that and spot it at the beginning?
Yeah, having very good knowledge about it. Like, get my book, Puzzling People. Look for the common indicators that are out there. Look at his past. They all have missing. Don't go for the BS and the flash and the crap they give you at first. Look at his background. What is your previous business? Oh, I know. I was in Ireland. I ran a Whole Food Organics. What was the name of the company? Oh, it was called, Shannon Organics. You go over and you find this company existed. If it did exist, did it go into bankruptcy? Did he, that kind of thing? Does he have a history of bankruptcy somewhere else? You have to be like a detective. You cannot trust anyone with your life now. And the same with a relationship. You've got to figure out what this person was before you knew them. I mean, and that goes for lots of things in your life. Like, this is one of the reasons in this alternative movement, I'm not crazy about people who use fake names, because I want to know who they are and what they did before they became like some kind of hero of the truth movement. I want to know these New Agers. Well, no, your name is not, Starseed, Angel Fire. What is your real name and who are you? And that's a way of getting around them. And they don't like that, and they'll run a mile. If they think you're onto them, they will bypass you. If they think that they can fool you, they'll do their best. Knowledge is power in this situation in dealing with the psychopaths. You cannot automatically trust someone when you're dealing this whole unconditional love bullshit. We have to get out of this crap. Everything should be conditional when dealing with people. And we should be very careful, and we have to learn to be students of them as much as they're students of us. And it is possible. Now, I can't say I don't get the odd one messing with me now and again, but it's generally only happens online, and I'm even getting good at spotting them there too.
And how do you spot them? If they're on the phone or something like that. What are there some giveaway signs that you could suggest as a tip?
Well, I mentioned flattery. They're extreme flatterers. The love bombing. What they're doing is they're trying to flood your brain with dopamine, so you feel relaxed and comfortable around them. Flattery sets off that. If you're in a relationship with them, they want sex constantly. The sex never stops. It's endless, constant sexual activity. That's to stop you from being able to think straight. They have high levels of testosterone, both the males and the female. Doesn't mean the male and females are butch. Men find high testosterone, heterosexual men find high testosterone very sexually attractive in women. It's not sure why, but they do. Very sexually appealing. If they're not that good looking and seem to have their pick of partners, like they're specifically they're very unattractive, and yet they seem to have no problem finding handsome men or beautiful women, that's because they're using these flattery tricks and they're using this love bombing and playing on people. They often have strange or missing pasts. That's a big giveaway as well. Who was this person? Or they tried to whitewash their own past. That kind of thing. They change personas from situations. This is quite a spooky one. For instance, the guy that I told you about that may have been in a business with you, pretending to be into your business, may be setting himself up on the side as a weapons manufacturer or an arms dealer. While he's preaching peace and love with you, he could be running an arms business on the side. And you might accidentally one day bump into them where they're in a different persona. This is like really spooky. I'll give you an example of this. It's very commonly reported to me, because psychopaths have poor facial recognition, that they would be walking down the street one day, and we'll talk about someone they could have been married to for years or in a relationship with for years, right? And they accidentally came upon the psychopath walking down the street. And they would say it was the most bizarre thing. They had a completely different body language, and they didn't even look like their husband or wife. And then it could get even stranger. They could suddenly come up behind them and go tap them on the shoulder, and the psychopath turns around and does this. Hey! They need time to scan you to figure out who you are, because you're not even in their minds, their hearts, their souls then. They're working and thinking and programming someone else. It's almost like they're having to find the persona that they actually use to manipulate and target you. And I've heard so many stories like this, and it's really a very, very spooky thing. It was that famous Vince Foster, the guy who allegedly committed suicide, who was close friends to Bill. He actually was the campaign manager for Bill Clinton when he ran for president of the United States. His suicide note said something like, "You think you know a person until they get a new job, and that new job is president," or something like that. Well, what happened was when Clinton, or Hillary, it was probably more like a Hillary Clinton, needed him to get them into the White House, she would have been wonderful. Oh, she couldn't do enough for him. Promising the sun, the moon, the stars. As soon as she got into the White House, her husband got into the White House, he probably went in, Vince Foster, going, "Hey, Hillary, how's it going?" And she goes, "What do you want?" "Well, I thought we had an agreement. You give me a job, and now you're not needed anymore. We're in here. Bye-bye." Cold. And that's what they're like, just business. And that's a way to spot them as well, the persona switching. It's quite spooky, because they don't have a person internal, as Harry Cleckley found out back in the 1940s, they don't have an internal personality structure as such. If you talk to a psychopath, they'll tell you they don't feel like they're inside their own bodies. They don't feel like there's a sense of emptiness there. And they invent the personalities to compensate for the sense of emptiness. And they enjoy it. It's fun. This is why they often have the smirk. Or they get one, that smirk that like Rumsfeld, and they all have that smirk, What that smirk is a thing called duper's delight. They're addicted to the adrenaline rush of fooling people. And when they have an adrenaline rush, they get that smirk. And that's what that causes that. Dr. Robert Hare, the University of British Columbia, has done some fantastic research on that. And yes, so they can't be spotted. But again, you can't walk down the street going, "Oh, he's a psychopath. Oh, she's a psychopath." You have to study these people, because most times an asshole is just an asshole. I don't know if I can say that word, sorry. Most times a jerk is just a jerk. But sometimes they're not. And so you have to assume, you can't be going around, degrading a person's humanity by saying, "Oh, she's a psychopath," unless you know for sure. But you've got to observe them and see how they behave, and how cold and ruthless and manipulative they are. And then when you observe this, my primary introduction was, I was in a relationship in my early 20s when I played in a rock band in New York with basically a groupie, this beautiful girl. And she just went through me like a freight train and left me in a state of, when she walked out on me, left me in a terrible state emotionally and psychologically and every other way. And that always stayed with me. What the hell was that? Who the hell was she? What was she? I mean, how could she do this to me? It was so vicious and cold. I then went to work as a graphic designer and communications consultant years later on Wall Street, and I was working with these creatures at places. Well, I wouldn't say a lot of them. I'd say my whole life I've met five pure psychopaths that I've dealt with, and I started to understand that there were people in this world that were slightly different, and it was from my exposure to working with them on Wall Street, the ones working in middle management, and at the same time, I was very interested in serial killers and stuff like that. And it was a goldmine of information, because there had been no clinical studies done on psychopaths. Well, there was a few like Herbie Cleckley's back in the 40s, and books like M. Scott Peck's People of the Lie, but there wasn't much else. But I discovered that, and it's been a great asset to me ever since, is reading the criminal psychology and psychological profiles of serial killers, I was able to understand that the fellows I was working with were exactly the same. They didn't use an axe and a chainsaw. What they used was finance, big business, and globalization.
So I'd like to talk about various professions that psychopaths choose. Let me ask you, in your opinion, how many politicians are psychopaths?
I think they'll all become protos in the end. I would say there's a very high cluster up in top politics. Now, not you know, the University College London did some very good work in determining the psychopathic levels of various professions. And funny, they didn't in the top 10 mention politicians, but they said that's generally because politicians would be things like lawyers in their real life and stuff like that. And lawyers scored like second or third on the scale. And the number one place where they were clustered the most is a CEO of a large corporation. That's where they were the highest. I would say in politics, you get quite a lot that be elected politicians. You get a far bigger amount of them in the senior civil service. That also scored very high on the University College London scale, very high up there. Also was any religious or ministers or clergy or cult leaders. They're very, very people who claim to be contacting aliens and have special messages from the gods and all this nonsense. Or people who are, high levels in religious orders or TV evangelists, new age leaders, very, very high levels of psychopathy in those groups. That's why you don't get involved in. And surgeons, trauma surgeons, because they're ice cold, they can open up people and they can make enormous amounts of money doing heart transplants, complex surgeries. They're not shaking. They're not thinking to themselves, if I make one mistake here, I might kill this patient. They don't care. They go in there as if they're fixing a computer. And this can often make them an awful lot of money as a trauma surgeon. And showbiz, TV presenters, radio presenters scored very, very high as well. The professions that scored very, very low was anyone involved in healing, anyone involved in kind of a healer kind of thing, involved in midwifery, and artists scored very low. Primary school teachers scored very low, and any creative persons, because a psychopath is terrible at being creative. They don't know what creativity is. They only copy and mimic. They make terrible original musicians and painters and artists. They just copy other people's styles if they can do it at all. So yeah, the politicians. Yeah, I'm sure if we went into the UN, there'd be hundreds of them in the main assembly hall.
And how about dentists?
Dentists, that didn't score on the list. I don't think so. Maybe, who knows? Any business that you can get and make an awful lot of money for not that much work. That's why so many of them are drawn to management. Just in showbiz management, it's packed to the gills with them. And entertainment, where especially if it's like, you look at someone like Jimmy Savile, talentless. He had no talent. Yeah, he was the money that he made and fame that he enjoyed because of what he did in his own life. Is because the psychopath in there just made him good at what he, manipulating people and getting what he wanted. And so, dentists, I'm sure they're in every profession, Clive. I'm sure there's electricians and carpenters and plumbers and everything else that are them. But they do cluster towards businesses that you can make a lot of money in it for not doing an awful lot of work, and also has a prestige. They can get you a fast car, they can get you women, they can get you power.
Well, that's incredibly enlightening, and I'm sure the viewers are going to have learned a lot there, and hopefully it'll stop a lot of pain going on in relationships and business and so on. We're coming out at the end of our time for this particular show, but if I may, I'd very much like to invite you back another time to talk further on this and the other many subjects that you know so much about.
Well, it'd be my pleasure, Clive. It's great to be able to get this information out to your audience, because the only reason I do this and expose myself to great danger, and I really do at times, and I've been targeted by cults and everything, because I've sussed out what certain cult leaders are up to and things like that, is because to keep people safe, because if we can cut the snake up, the psychopaths out of our personal lives at the bottom, out of our business lives, everyday lives, we will create a situation where psychopaths will not be able to feed and move and be ferally as free as they are in society right now. It's almost like we'll be developing a new instinct, and psychopaths will find it so difficult to manipulate themselves into other higher positions simply because they won't be able to get into the power bases, because they'll be cut off or sussed out at the bottom. And it won't cure them, but it will cut off their career prospects.
Well, brilliant. Thank you so much, Thomas. And we'll hope to see you again shortly, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next show. Cheerio.
Thank you very much, Clive. Thank you.